Join me on Thursday, May 10th at 5 p.m. Eastern for the 9 Key Ps of Digital Citizenship, sponsored by NetRef. Just go to coolcatteacher.com/NetRef and stay tuned at the end of the show to learn more about a special offer from NetRef. How to Make Math Visual, Episode 304. The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today. Today, we're talking with Kyle Pearce, K-12 math consultant in Greater Essex County, Ontario. So, Kyle, today we are talking about making math visual. Why do we want to make math visual?
Making math visual is something that is near and dear to my heart. For years, I was trying to teach students in high school and found that students often were struggling, like in many classrooms. And when I started making math more visual, I was able to access all the learners in my classroom. And that sort of sprouted into some of these new ideas, such as makingmathvisual.com.
So give me an example of how you've made math visual.
What I've actually tried to do now is I actually try to start from a concrete stage where we try to look at the math in the real world. And when we think about younger grades in mathematics, we do a great job with this, right? We count objects around the home. We then use linking cubes and square tiles, and we do all kinds of fabulous things with manipulatives. But then as we get a little older, things become a little more difficult. And I believe it really stems from our ability to actually understand the conceptual understanding behind the mathematics. Most of us were taught procedurally in nature, and thus we tend to do the same thing. So when we think about things like multiplying fractions, we're more likely to teach students a bunch of steps and procedures rather than actually allowing them to see the mathematics that we're actually engaging in, which will make that procedure a whole lot easier later on when they're ready.
Now, what you're doing is actually based in research. Tell us about that research.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of research about the importance of concrete manipulatives as well as visuals. And one such theory is called concreteness fading. And in this research, they suggest 3 stages, although I would argue that within each stage there are some more subtle stages as well. But generally, we want to start with a concrete stage where we're actually looking at physical manipulatives. So for example, if I'm counting donuts in a box, it's great to have a context. It's great to actually have the donuts. Over time, what will happen is students will become comfortable with that concept and they'll stop needing the actual concrete manipulative and they'll start moving to more what we call a visual stage. So they can actually make a drawing or some sort of diagrammic representation of this visual. And then over time, we tend to use symbols like numbers and operations in order to represent these visuals. But the problem is that many of us tend to start with the symbols and try to unpack them for students rather than starting with concrete and working towards those symbols. So that's really the push from this research and what I'm trying to do with my website and in my classroom.
So the problem is with high school. So we're moving into algebra, and we know how important algebra is. How do teachers make things more concrete or more visual? I mean, they start off at your site, but are there things they can do in the classroom?
Absolutely. And, as we get into the higher grades, if you're in grade 11 or grade 12, things do get more abstract. There, the visual might be something like graphing. It's great to be able to see it happening in the real world aside from the graph as well or at the same time. But when we think about middle school and heading into subject areas like or courses like Algebra 1 in the US, we can be doing things like solving equations by actually showing students how equations work, whether that be with a balance model. We can do this with all kinds of different manipulatives on the web. Solve Me Mobiles, for example, is a great tool online that really makes solving equations visual and very intuitive. So there's all of kinds of tools out there. It's just unfortunate that not all of us are aware of them yet anyway. So we're hoping to try to share some of that through this show here today.
So if you're working with a math teacher, they're struggling to really help their kids understand math, but where do they start if they're kind of a struggling math teacher working with struggling kids to kind of move in this direction?
Yeah, I think we really have to focus on understanding our curriculum. And that's not just knowing the curriculum we need to teach, but also understanding where it comes from. So if I'm teaching a grade 9 class, for example, and I'm trying to teach a concept and I'm not really certain why that concept works, I've really got to start doing some research online. And luckily for us, Vimeo and YouTube and Google just in general, we could be going and learning about some of these concepts and really trying to think about them from a conceptual standpoint. So if my lesson sort of sounds like steps and procedures, follow this or do this and then that and then that, that might suggest that maybe I'm not that comfortable with the conceptual underpinnings of that concept, which means I've got a little bit of homework to do first before I can then help my students.
But math teachers are so busy, or they might think, well, I've always taught it this way. Kids just aren't paying attention like they used to. What do you say to that?
I felt that way. I was there. I taught the majority of my career from a procedural standpoint. And again, we're not suggesting procedures are not important, because they definitely are. But the reality is that if students aren't understanding the concept, if they're not understanding how it works, if it's just memorization of steps and procedures, or they're just trying to mimic what the teacher's doing, you can imagine that as they go through school, eventually they're going to lose their interest in mathematics. The engagement's going to go down. And that's typically what we see as students struggle. They sort of think math must not be for me. But if I'm teaching it where only students who are really good memorizers and are able to regurgitate content can do mathematics, then we're really not being equitable to all the students in our classroom. So we really want to access that concrete and that visual as a way to lower the floor on problems and really help students understand the mathematics so that they can work towards some of that procedural fluency that we're hoping they'll achieve by the end of our course.
Kyle, if you could travel back in time and talk to Kyle, first-year math teacher, about this, what would you say?
Oh, I would say you think you know so much, Kyle, and you know so little. Every single day I realize that I really didn't know a whole lot. I like to say now that I have a math degree, a university math degree in procedural fluency, but about a grade 7 or 8 level in conceptual understanding. So I'm really still learning as well. And I'm hoping that with all the teachers online and with all of our teachers and colleagues at school that we work with, we can all support each other to better understand the math in service of our students in our classroom.
Wow. And how many years have you been teaching, Kyle?
This is my 12th year and second year in the K-12 math consultant role. So I've learned a ton, getting to spend all kinds of time in elementary as well as secondary. And I just can't wait to continue learning.
Do you think students are different now than when you started?
You know what? I think we're all the same. I mean, the world around us has changed quite a bit. But you know what? Nowadays, we do such a great job at making sure students come to school that we're seeing a lot of different students that we might not have seen 20, 30 years ago. A lot of students might just drop out if they felt that school wasn't for them. So right now, we're keeping lots of students in the seats all the way through high school to get a diploma. I think we've just got to do some digging in order to make sure that we can help all students succeed, because I truly believe that everyone is a mathematician.
So Kyle, give us a 30-second pep talk for math teachers to reach every child in those seats.
I want to say if I'm not understanding where that mathematics comes from, where it develops, if I don't understand, how math develops over time, that's from K to 12. I like to think that if I'm a high school teacher, I can't just focus on the secondary curriculum. I need to understand how students learn math in grade 1, how they learn it in grade 2, all the way up to grade 9, 10, 11, and 12 in order to have success and in order to potentially reach all of those students in my classroom.
Wow, that sounds overwhelming, Kyle. Is it possible?
I think it definitely is. And I think as we continue to do this learning together through things like the internet, when you can go on Twitter and see people posting animations of math concepts, little 20-second video clips, I can learn so much in such a short period of time. If I'm looking for that learning, I can find it. And you've got so many people out there that are willing to lend you a hand. So just make sure that you're not scared to ask for that help, and someone will come to help you out for sure.
So Kyle, as we finish up, what are those hashtags where you're finding these?
I love looking at the math Twitter blogosphere. That's hashtag MTBOS. Now a lot of people are using I Teach Math as well. And then I like to do a lot of my posting of visuals on mathisvisual.com, as well as the Twitter handle at mathisvisual.
So we have all of these resources. We also have mathisvisual.com that Kyle has created for all of you math teachers out there to be more remarkable and to make math more concrete and more understandable for all of our students. Thank you, Kyle. On Thursday, May 10th at 5 p.m. Eastern, I'll be sharing the 9 key P's of digital citizenship in a webinar sponsored by NetRef. I've written about these on Edutopia and in my book, Reinventing Writing. But I have some updates about how I teach these 9 important aspects of digital citizenship. Join us for the webinar or sign up to have the webinar emailed to you after it's completed. I appreciate NetRef for sponsoring this webinar on an important topic and for offering all attendees a free pilot of their internet management and monitoring solution. Sign up today for the webinar at coolcatteacher.com/netref. That's coolcatteacher.com/NETREF. Thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. You can download the show notes and see the archive at coolcatteacher.com/podcast. Never stop learning.